In this video, I'm going to be going over how to add copyright text overlays to your Sega Genesis splash screen. In a previous tutorial, we went over how to create your very own splash screen using the Sega Genesis development kit. And in this video, we're going to be building upon that. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a copyright text overlay. So this would be similar to like the EA splash screen that you would see if you first boot up Madden, where it's got the logo and then it's got maybe some copyright information before it gets you into the title screen. So to do this, we're going to start off by creating a new project. And we're going to be using Visual Studio Code for all this. And we're just going to call it Retro Mic Tutorial. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import some resources here. So let's grab our, let's grab the music, and also we're going to grab our logo. Now, in the previous tutorial, what I did, oops, we can't do it that way. Reveal in File Explorer. And we need to copy it over here. In the previous tutorial, we used this Retro Mic logo PNG, which was a little bit bigger. It was 320 by 240. It was using the full screen. In this tutorial, I went ahead and I've created a separate logo, which is 128 by 128 pixels. So if we open this up, it's just the square representation of the logo. No additional background, no expanded canvas on that one. So the idea here is we'll center the logo, we'll fade it in, we'll show some copyright text, maybe above and below the image. We'll still play our music, and then that'll kind of be it for the tutorial. So, right off the bat here, we need to, we'll have to create our resources file. Which again is very straightforward, right? It's just an image and an XGM. So let's start with that. So we're going to do new file here. And we're just going to name it resources.res. And we're going to load up our logo. And then we'll load up our audio file. So it's just going to be image. And then the name of our image, which is this. We cannot drag and drop it. Okay. Sure, mic logo underscore logo only .png. And oh, we forgot to name it, so we got to name our variable. We'll just name this Retro Mic Logo. And on the compression, we'll do none. And then our music, so we've got XGM, and our track, we've got to create a variable for it, so let's just do Retro Mic Intro Track. And our file name, it's going to be Retro Mic Intro Music.vgm. And it's just one track. Okay. Alright, now let's go in the source, let's go into our main. And right off the bat, before we start coding anything, let's just compile this, make sure our environment's all good to go. And it is. Alright, so first thing we'll do is go ahead and get rid of the commented code. Alright, and so what we're going to do is before the game loop, we're going to generate our splash screen. We'll reserve the game loop for the actual game. So up here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a method for our game config. And what this will do is this will set up the ROM for the correct dimensions and any type of game config that we might want to do. So I'm just going to create another method called game config. And then within this method, we're just going to set up the screen. So we'll do sys disable interrupts. And then at the end of it, we'll re-enable the interrupts. And then within here, we're going to set the screen width to 320. So we just do VDP underscore set screen width 320. And then we're going to set the screen height to 240, just like we did in the previous video. So let's do set screen height 240. Alright, so that'll make sure that our screen resolution is 320 by 240. Our first line in main is we're going to call that game config. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create another one called run intro. And this is where we'll have all the code for our intro screen. And so we'll call that here. Alright, so in the run intro, this is where we need to start setting up the palette colors, rendering our image to the screen. So let's start with that. So on this one, we're just going to do set palette colors. First thing we want to do is load up the palette from our image. So we're going to do our retromiclogo.palette, and let's grab the palette data from that. And we're going to grab all 64. Okay. And then, actually, if we run this, what you'll see make sure. First thing, the other thing we want to do here before we do that is include our resources file. So we're going to include resources.header. Alright, we'll compile and run that. Alright, so we're good there. Now the next thing we're going to do is, here I'm actually going to set the background color, but before I do this, I'm going to draw the picture to the screen so you can see why we have to explicitly set the background color. So we're going to do VDP, draw image, and we're going to use plain A for this, and then let's grab our logo. Richard Mike logo. And we're going to draw it at position 13.5. This is essentially going to be around the center of the screen. And then let's go ahead and do the fading. So we want to create our palette complete variable here. Right, so we've got 16 palette complete. It's going to be 64 colors. And then we're going to run our mem copy. So we want to load this all into palette complete. And we're going to grab our palette data from our image. And once again, we're looking at 40 or 64 colors rather. And then we're going to run our fade in. So it's going to be VDP, fade in, starting at color 0, fading to 63. And palette complete. And then our number of frames that we want to do, let's go ahead and do 100. And it's not asynchronous. Alright, so if we do this, what you'll notice here, see how the background is green? This is because it's using our color palette, right? And so we want to tell it to use the color black from that palette instead of the green. So we do that very simply right here. We can simply do VDP set background color. And here's where you specify the index of the palette that has the color we want to use. I know that I want to use 10 because I know that is the black, or should be the black from this scheme. Background, forgot the D here. So let's go ahead and compile that and run it. And here we can see that looks better, right? So now I've got black, and you don't really see any of that green or anything. Now, if you weren't sure what position it is, you could really just cycle through these. We'll just run through a couple real quick to show you. So if I do 0, you can see that's the green. And then if I do 1, you can see that's kind of like that bright pink color from the retro and from the circular. And then if we do 2, I'm not going to run through all the colors, but you can see this is a slightly different shade of green. And then here you can see that's a little bit of a darker green. And you can see these are just going to be those shades. I will just do 1 more, and then I'll do 10. So here you can see it's a little bit brighter green. So let's go back to 10, and that's going to be our black. And again, 10 is black on my image because of the palette I chose to use. Yours will vary. You can view those palettes in Photoshop, or you can view them in various imaging tools. Alright, so before we get too far down, I'm going to go ahead and start up the music. So typically I like to do this before I draw the image. That way the music's starting to play while the image is drawing. So we're just going to do XGM, start play. And we're going to grab our music variable name, plug that in there, and it's going to start playing that. And then at the very end, we'll want to stop that as the last command. Alright, so we've got our music playing, we've got our image fading in. So that's all good. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to fade it out. So right here, I'm going to simplify this from the last tutorial. So in the last one, we did a fade in, fade out, fade in, fade out. This one, we're just going to do a fade in, render the text, and then we're going to fade everything out, which would then eventually transition to a title screen. So in this case, I'm going to do fade out all. Number of frames, we'll just do 100. It's not asynchronous. So what we'll end up with this case is we'll end up with our image, and then it's gonna fade out. So if we just run this real quick. And there you can see, so it faded in, our music started playing, faded in, faded out, our music stopped. Obviously that was way too quick. So what we'll do here is we can add in basically a sleep timer in here. And so that's what I'm going to do here. So prior to fading out, just for the purposes of this video, we'll wait 10 seconds. Normally I would do something like 2 to 3 seconds. You don't want to have it sitting out there for a really long time. But what we can do is we can do wait ms for milliseconds and then specify the number of milliseconds. So if we want 10 seconds, that's going to be 10,000 milliseconds. And this wait ms is part of the Sega Genesis SDK. So you're able to just call this, it's in the timer class. So you don't have to do any complex conversions to time spans or anything to run the sleeps. So that is really nice. It's one of the big benefits here. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw our text. So what we'll do is once we do the fade in, we're going to want to set our text palette color. And the reason for this is if we don't do this, we're going to end up with black text. So the first thing we'll do is we'll do text palette. And this is going to set the palette. Now remember, I've gone over this in previous video. There's 4 palettes you have access to. 0, 1, 2, and 3. So you can load up to 4 separate palettes of colors into memory. So what we're going to do is we're going to use palette 1 instead of palette 0 for our text. So palette 0 is going to be our logo. Palette 1 is going to be for the text. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the color. So we're going to do VDP. And we're going to do set palette colors. Oops, set palette color, singular. And then we're going to set 31. And what this is each palette is essentially 32. So 0 to 31 is kind of, 0 to 16, each palette 16 colors. All right, so 0 to 15 would be for palette 0. And then 16 to 31 is going to be for palette 1. Now, text always uses the very last color of that given palette. So that's the reason we're setting 31. We're using palette 1. We want the very last color in palette 1. So 31, we'll do VDP, get palette color. And there's several ways you can do this. You can convert like a hex code. If you're familiar with like CSS coding, web design, you can grab a hex code for a color and you can load that into the palette. For our purposes, I'm going to use code 14. And what this is going to do is this is actually going to grab position 14. So this is going to be essentially the 15th color from palette 0, which is what is on our image. So this way my text will match the color from the logo. We're going to load that in the 31. Be cautious you don't use anything lower than 16 because it will interfere with your image. Right? It would actually change the color of my picture. So if you're trying to tint your picture or anything like that, you can definitely use that for that. Alright, and then the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to do 3 lines of text here. So my plan is at the very top of my screen, I want it to show my YouTube channel. And at the bottom, I'm going to show 2 lines. I'm going to show kind of a copyright line and then an all rights reserved line. So what I like to do is I like to create some character arrays to hold those messages. So we're just going to say copyright message, line 1, or we can just do copyright message. And then this one we're going to say copyright 2022 Retro Mike. And then we'll create, oops, sorry, I'm in C# land here. Okay. Then we're going to do a rights reserved message. And we're going to just kind of put all rights reserved. And then we want our YouTube link. So we'll just do YouTube message. And we'll just set this to youtube.com/retromike. Alright. Now what we can do is we can draw the text. And this is very simple to do. There is a method that we get to call to access drawing text from the VDP. So all we have to do is VDP, draw text. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the YouTube message, because we want that at the top of the screen. And in order to center it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 20 minus, and we're going to grab the length of the string, and that's going to be YouTube message. You can also just put the number in, but I like doing this because then I don't have to determine the exact character length of each message. If I ever want to change a message, I don't have to change the code along with it. And then we're going to divide that by 2. And we're going to put that at row 1 so it shows at the very top of the screen. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do our 2 lines at the bottom of the screen. So we can pretty much copy this. And we want our copyright message to be here. And we want it to be at line 26. And then we want our all rights reserved to be here. Oops. And we want it to be at line 27. All right, so now if we load this up, let's view the output. Looks like we have an error message. Let's just take a look at our code real quick. Oh, we forgot a semicolon here. And so here you can see it faded in. We've got our YouTube message at the top with our link there. And then we've got our copyright line. And then we've got our all rights reserved. We'll go ahead and do a system reset here. And you can see that it's all centered throughout the screen. And so that's what the 20 minus the length of the string divided by 2 allows us to kind of center that text. All right, so fade out. And then in a future video, we'll be going over a title screen. We're kind of use this as a basis for all future tutorials. But that's it for the video. Drop me a comment below. Let me know what you thought about this, and let me know if there's any specific tutorials you'd like to see in the future. Thank you for watching.